you are already home. Ancient Buddhist wisdom for deep inner rest. The rain outside does not fall in a single massive sheet of water. It arrives as 10,000 individual drops, each striking the window pane with a distinct, sharp microsound. If you sit quietly enough in the center of your room, you can hear the precise moment a droplet shatters against the glass, pooling into a miniature stream that forces its way downward by gravity. Yet, when we step outside, we rarely feel the individual drops. We simply say, "It is raining." We lump the infinite shifting architecture of the present moment into a single heavy word, and in doing so, we miss the texture of our own reality. This is exactly how we treat our minds. We look at the complex, lightning-fast network of our anxieties, our neurological firings, the tightening of our chest muscles, and the sudden bitter taste of resentment on the back of our tongue, and we collapse it all into a single exhausting summary. I am stressed, I am unhappy, I am not yet where I need to be. We spend our entire existence waiting for the weather of our lives to clear, convinced that peace is a distant, sunlit meadow we will eventually stumble into once we have climbed over the rugged mountains of our current obligations. We treat peace as a geographical destination, a trophy at the end of an exhausting marathon, or a financial milestone that will finally grant us permission to exhale. We tell ourselves that if we can just survive this difficult quarter, if we can just fix this broken relationship, if we can just heal this specific childhood wound, then and only then will we sit down in the quiet sanctuary of contentment. But notice the structural trap inherent in this logic. By defining peace as something to be reached, we automatically turn the present moment into an obstacle, a piece of rough terrain that we must aggressively conquer, trample, and bypass just to get to the imaginary finish line. The pursuit of peace becomes the very weapon that destroys it. Look closely at how we move through a standard modern afternoon. We sit in gridlocked traffic, our hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that our knuckles turn a pale, bloodless white. Our eyes are fixed on the brake lights of the vehicle ahead, but our minds are already 20 minutes into the future, rehearsing an awkward conversation with a manager, or calculating the interest on an unpaid bill, or replaying an argument from 3 nights ago. The body is in the year 2026, sitting on a leather car seat, but the mind is a time traveler, frantically darting between a past that cannot be rewritten and a future that does not yet exist. We are physically present but psychologically exiled. We treat the current moment as a mere bridge to be crossed, an inconvenient tax we must pay in order to arrive at some magnificent. Later, we have become professional collectors of conditions. We believe that internal serenity is a complex chemical formula that requires exactly the right ingredients to manifest: the perfect amount of money in the bank, a flawlessly symmetrical body, an absence of physical pain, a pristine reputation, and an environment completely free of difficult people. If even one of these variables is slightly out of place, we declare our inner peace impossible. We say, "How can I be calm when the world is burning? How can I find stillness when my inbox is overflowing and my back hurts?" We have made our well-being completely contingent on an unstable, fluctuating outer world that has absolutely no obligation to conform to our desires. We are like a sailor who refuses to be happy until they can command the ocean to stop producing waves. We are drowning in our own conditions, paralyzed by the sheer weight of everything we think we need to fix before we can finally be allowed to breathe. Consider the physical reality of this constant low-grade sprint. Right now, as these words echo in your ears, feel the weight of your own shoulders. Are they dropped completely, resting heavily away from your ears, or are they subtly hoisted upward, locked in a microscopic shrug of perpetual defense? Notice the tiny muscles around your eyes and across your forehead. Is there a faint habitual knit in your brow, an invisible armor you wear against the day? Scan the alignment of your jaw. Are your upper and lower teeth pressed tightly together, clenched in a silent, unconscious effort to hold your life in place? This is the physical debris of the destination mindset. The body does not understand abstract concepts. It only knows that when the mind treats the present moment as a battleground or a hurdle, the nervous system prepares for war. Your shallow breath, your tight chest, your hypervigilant stance, these are not design flaws in your biology. They are the perfectly logical physical translations of an ancient erroneous belief. that you are not yet home, and that you must run faster to get there. Let us look at three distinct faces of this modern exhaustion, three archetypes of the frantic search, to see where this biological and psychological tightrope leads. The first is the high achiever, an individual whose entire identity is anchored to the horizon. Let us observe her as she sits at her desk at midnight, illuminated only by the sterile blue glow of dual monitors. Her back is a rigid pillar of tension. The muscles running along her spine have contracted into hard, fibrous knots from hours of maintaining an aggressive forward lean. Her breath is short and shallow, barely dipping below her collarbone, a classic sign of a sympathetic nervous system stuck in a permanent loop of fight or flight. To the world, she is a spectacular success, orderly, brilliant, and impeccably organized. But if you look closer, her jaw is locked so tightly that the enamel of her teeth is wearing down. She is driven by a phantom voice that whispers, "Once you secure the next promotion, once you hit this revenue target, once your portfolio looks unassailable, then you can finally stop. Then you will be safe. Then you will be enough." But notice what happens when she actually reaches the summit she so desperately clawed toward. The bonus arrives. The title is updated on her profile. The applause washes over Heron within 48 hours. The expected wave of profound, permanent peace fails to materialize. Instead, there is only a brief, hollow flicker of relief, quickly replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The horizon has simply shifted further out. The mountain she just climbed is suddenly downgraded to a mere hill, and a new, taller peak reveals itself in the distance. The mind, conditioned entirely to the hunt, cannot tolerate the arrival. It immediately manufactures a new lack, a new milestone, because to stop running would mean facing the terrifying emptiness that lives beneath the achievement. She is trapped on a hedonic treadmill, her body physically breaking down under the weight of cortisol and adrenaline, all in service of a peace that is perpetually scheduled for next year. Then there is the hypervigilant controller. We see him pacing the floor of his kitchen at dawn, checking his phone for news updates, scanning his emails, reading texts to ensure no misunderstandings have occurred. His physical body is a portrait of hyperreactivity. His stomach is constantly tied in a tight, acidic knot. His heart rate spikes at every sudden notification chime, and his eyes dart rapidly from one object to another. He believes with absolute certainty that peace is something that must be engineered through total, flawless control of his environment. If he can just predict every disaster, if he can just micromanage the emotions of his partner, if he can just insulate his children from every conceivable hardship, and if he can just organize his schedule down to the single minute, then he will finally earn the right to relax. His life has become an endless game of emotional whack-a-mole. Every time he successfully stabilizes one area of his life, another area erupts into chaos. A family member gets sick, a market crashes, a pipe bursts in the basement, or a colleague makes an unpredictable, irrational decision. Because his peace is built upon the fragile illusion of control, every unpredictable event feels like a violent personal assault on his sanity. His body remains stuck in a state of chronic inflammation. His digestion is erratic, and his sleep is fractured by vivid analytical dreams. He is utterly exhausted from trying to build a fortress of certainty in a universe whose very nature is fluid, unpredictable, and wild. Finally, let us observe the spiritual seeker. She has abandoned the pursuit of corporate titles and material wealth, recognizing them as empty illusions. But she has fallen into a far more subtle and insidious trap. She sits on her meditation cushion, her legs crossed in a perfect lotus posture, her outer appearance the very picture of serene equilibrium. But look inside her mind. There is a fierce, aggressive civil war raging beneath the calm exterior. She is watching her breath, but the moment a stray thought arises, a memory of an old lover, a flash of irritation about a noise outside, she berates herself severely. I shouldn't be thinking this. A truly spiritual person would be detached. I am failing at mindfulness. She spends her days jumping from one intense wellness retreat to another, trying every breathwork modality, accumulating crystals, reading ancient texts, and tracking her heart rate variability during meditation. Her physical body carries a unique, refined kind of tension, a curated stiffness, an artificial posture designed to project enlightenment. She treats her own human flaws, her anger, her grief, and her ordinary desires as pollutants that must be systematically eradicated. She is running toward an idealized, transcendent version of herself that exists only in her imagination. And in doing so, she has developed a deep, profound aversion to her actual, messy, lived experience. She is using the teachings of liberation to build a more beautiful, spiritually sophisticated prison. She is searching for peace with the exact same consumeristic, aggressive, goal-oriented mindset that she used when she was climbing the corporate ladder. The product has changed, but the pathology remains identical. What all three of these archetypes fail to see is that their frantic searching is the very mechanism that perpetuates their suffering. They are like a person who is covered in mud and attempts to clean themselves by jumping into a pool of wet cement. Every action they take to secure peace only embeds them deeper in the friction of struggle. They are operating under the fundamental delusion that the present moment is a deficit to be corrected, rather than the only reality that will ever exist. To understand why this search is so uniquely agonizing, we must look at the ancient anatomy of human suffering as it was mapped out thousands of years ago, stripped of all modern self-help, jargon, and romanticized mysticism. The human predicament is not a modern invention. The neural pathways of our anxiety were forged in the exact same furnace as those of our ancestors. The Buddha pinpointed the root of this perpetual unrest not in the external events of our lives, but in a specific two-step psychological reaction that occurs within our minds every single second. He illustrated this through the timeless framework of the two arrows. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and out of the blue, a sharp arrow flies through the air and strikes you in the shoulder. The pain is immediate, intense, and visceral. The flesh is torn, the nerves scream, and the blood begins to flow. This first arrow represents the unavoidable, inherent friction of being alive in a physical body within an unpredictable world. The first arrow is the physical illness that catches you by surprise. It is the sudden economic downturn that shrinks your savings. It is the traffic jam when you are already late for a critical interview. It is the natural aging of your parents, the betrayal of a trusted companion, or the simple, irritating sound of a car alarm blaring outside your window while you are trying to sleep. The first arrow is reality presenting itself exactly as it is, independent of your preferences. It is the basic, unvarnished truth of impermanence and unpredictability. In our ordinary way of living, however, we never stop at the first arrow. The moment the first arrow pierces our skin, we do something extraordinary and tragic. We reach into our own quiver, pull out a second arrow, and deliberately fire it into the exact same wound. The second arrow is our mental reaction to the first arrow. The second arrow is the internal monologue that screams, "Why does this always happen to me? This isn't fair. If I had only made a different choice 5 years ago, I wouldn't be in this position. They are doing this on purpose to ruin my day. My life is an absolute disaster, and it will never get better." The first arrow causes physical pain. The second arrow creates psychological suffering. The first arrow is the external event. The second arrow is the elaborate, dramatic, catastrophic story we weave around that event. Let us examine the profound biological difference between these two states. When the first arrow hits, say, a sudden sharp criticism from your boss, your body experiences a brief, natural physiological spike. Your heart rate increases for a few moments, a flush of heat might rise to your face, and your attention sharpens. If left alone, this natural biological wave will peak and subside within a matter of minutes, returning the body to its natural baseline of equilibrium. This is the fluid, self-regulating nature of human biology. But when you fire the second arrow, when you spend the next 4 hours at your desk obsessively rehearsing what you should have said in response, analyzing the hidden malicious motives of your boss, and imagining scenarios where you are fired and destitute, you are manually keeping that survival response alive. You are forcing your brain to continuously pump cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream long after the actual event has ended. The boss spoke for 30 seconds. You have chosen to torture yourself with their words. For 30 days, the body cannot distinguish between a physical tiger standing in front of you and a mental tiger you are projecting within your thoughts. The second arrow turns a momentary inconvenience into a chronic, toxic state of physical and mental illness. Why are we so addicted to firing this second arrow? Why do we choose, with terrifying consistency, to multiply our own agony? The answer lies buried deep within the architecture of the illusion we call the ego, the deeply ingrained belief that there is a solid, separate, unchanging I inside this body that must be aggressively protected, defended, and enhanced at all costs. We view ourselves as isolated fortresses, standing in opposition to the rest of the world. We believe that if we can just build the walls of this fortress high enough through wealth, status, knowledge, and flawless security, we can achieve a permanent state of invulnerability. This is the great cosmic misunderstanding. This separate, permanent self we are trying so desperately to protect does not exist. It is an optical illusion of consciousness. Just as a vortex in a river looks like a solid, independent object but is actually nothing more than a temporary dynamic pattern of rushing water. This I is not a static noun, it is a fluid, ever-changing process. It is a shifting constellation of thoughts, sensory perceptions, physical sensations, and memories that are constantly arising and dissolving into nothingness. When we do not realize this, when we mistake the fluid vortex for a solid rock, we live in a state of perpetual terror. Because deep down, the ego knows it is fragile. It knows it is completely at the mercy of impermanence. It knows that a single phone call from a doctor, a sudden shift in the stock market, or the natural ticking of the clock can completely demolish everything it has built. And so, the ego lives in a state of permanent defensive contraction. It treats everything that happens as a personal threat or a personal opportunity. When the world does not conform to our rigid desires, when the river of life flows in a direction we did not authorize, the ego experiences this as a violent shattering of its boundaries. It screams in protest, and that scream is the second arrow. Suffering is not caused by the external world, it is the friction generated when an unchanging, rigid ego collides with an ever-changing fluid universe. The greater our dingmakor desperate clinginess to things remaining exactly as we want them, to be the more violent and agonizing that collision will be. We are like a person trying to grab a handful of rushing water and weeping with rage when it slips through our fingers, blaming the water for its fluid nature rather than examining the absolute foolishness of our attempt to hold it still. To shift this lifelong pattern, we must radically alter our relationship with our own minds. We must move away from the aggressive, goal-oriented paradigm of Western achievement and enter the profound, spacious architecture of true insight. We must understand with absolute clarity that there is no path that leads to peace. Peace is not a distant temple that you reach by walking down a long, arduous road. Peace is the very manner in which you walk. Peace is not the absence of storms. It is the discovery of a spaciousness within yourself that can house the storm without being destroyed by it. Let us explore this through an image that reverses everything we have been taught about self-improvement. Imagine a vast, deep, crystal-clear lake surrounded by ancient mountains. The surface of this lake is completely still, mirroring the sky, the clouds, and the soaring eagles with absolute precision. When the lake is still, you can look down through the clear water and see the pebbles, the white sand, and the slow, rhythmic movement of the fish at the very bottom. Suddenly, a violent storm sweeps through the valley. Fierce winds whip across the water, and heavy rains pelt the surface. The lake is instantly transformed. The pristine mirror is shattered. The surface is broken into thousands of choppily crested, chaotic waves. The silt and mud from the bottom are stirred up, turning the once translucent water into a murky, opaque brown. You can no longer see the depths. You can no longer see the reflection of the sky. If you wanted to restore the lake to its original state of clarity and peace, what would you do? Would you wade out into the freezing water with a massive wooden board and try to physically press the waves flat? Would you grab a giant spoon and try to forcefully separate the mud from the water? If you did that, your very efforts would introduce more agitation, stir up more mud, and create even more chaotic ripples. The harder you fought to force the lake into stillness, the more turbulent it would become. There is only one way to bring peace back to the lake. You must leave it completely alone. You must sit quietly on the shore and allow the wind to blow itself out. You must allow the rain to stop in its own time. You must give the mud the space and time to naturally settle back down to the bottom by its own weight. Stillness is not an action you perform, it is what remains when all forced actions have completely ceased. Your mind is that lake. Your anxieties, your racing thoughts, your physical tensions, and your corporate stresses are the temporary storm sweeping across the surface. For your entire life, you have been wading into the turbulent water, trying to forcefully flatten the waves of your anxiety by thinking harder, planning more, or aggressively berating yourself for not being calm. You have been trying to cure a chaotic mind with more mental chaos. You must learn the exquisite art of sitting on the shore of your own awareness, letting the internal storm run its course without intervening, without fighting it, and without firing a single second arrow. How do we actually practice this in the chaotic theater of our everyday lives? It begins with a profound biological and psychological shift that we can call the practice of radical non-intervention. This is not a passive surrender or a lazy, indifferent apathy. It is a highly active, disciplined state of fierce inner presence. It is the willingness to look at whatever is arising within your body and mind in this exact microsecond. Whether it is an intense wave of anxiety, a sharp pang of physical pain, or a bitter thought of judgment, and allow it to exist completely, without attempting to fix it, change it, or run away from it. Let us break this down into a precise, actionable sequence that you can utilize the next time the pressure of your life threatens to overwhelm you. The first step is the transition from thinking to feeling. The moment you notice your mind spinning into a catastrophic narrative about the future, or a bitter review of the past, you must consciously and decisively withdraw your attention from the story. The story is the second arrow. Do not try to argue with the thoughts. Do not try to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Instead, drop your awareness directly down into the physical landscape of your body. Treat your thoughts like background noise, like static on a radio station, and turn your full investigative attention to your physiology. Ask yourself with profound curiosity, where is this stress living in my body right now? Locate it with anatomical precision. Is it a heavy, iron-like tightness behind your breastbone? Is it a hot, fluttering sensation in the pit of your stomach? Is it a sharp, restrictive contraction in the muscles of your throat? Is it a dull, throbbing pressure behind your temples? Once you have located the physical sensation, anchor your attention there. Do not try to make the tightness go away. Do not wish it were different. Breathe directly into the center of that discomfort, making your breath long, slow, and deep, allowing the belly to expand completely on the inhale and soften completely on the exhale. By doing this, you are sending a profound, undeniable signal to your nervous system that you are safe. You are demonstrating to your brain that the sensation inside you is not a terminal threat, but simply a temporary pattern of energy moving through your nervous system. The second step is the practice of radical nomenclature. When a difficult emotion arises, let us say it is a profound, suffocating sense of inadequacy. During a high-stakes meeting, ego's immediate response is to identify with it completely. It says, I am a failure, I am incompetent, I don't belong here. This total identification creates an immediate psychological suffocation. To break this spell, you must alter the language of your inner awareness. Instead of saying, I am anxious, you must shift to, there is a sensation of tightness in my chest, and the mind is labeling it as anxiety. Instead of saying, I am angry, you must shift to, there is a wave of heat rising in my body, and a thought of blame is passing through my awareness. Notice the immense, liberating space that opens up within this slight shift in vocabulary. You are no longer the storm, you are the vast sky that contains the storm. You are no longer the anger, you are the wide, luminous space of awareness in which the anger arises, lingers for a few moments, and inevitably dissolves. The sensation is inside you, but it does not define you. It is a temporary guest passing through the guest house of your consciousness. You do not need to kick the guest out, you simply need to stop inviting them to sit down and dictate the terms of your entire life. Let us look at how this shift entirely transforms our daily existence. When you understand that peace is the road and not the destination, the mundane architecture of your life becomes a series of profound opportunities for awakening. Consider the act of walking down a crowded city street to get a cup of coffee during a hectic workday. In the old destination-driven mindset, this walk was merely an inconvenient chore, a blank space between your desk and your caffeine fix. Your body was moving forward, but your mind was stuck back at your laptop, typing an email. You were completely blind to the world around you. But when you walk with the awareness that the path itself is the goal, everything changes. You feel the precise sensation of your heels striking the solid concrete pavement, followed by the rolling transition of weight to the ball of your foot. You notice the cool air entering your nostrils on the inhale, and the slightly warmer air exiting on the exhale. You perceive the kaleidoscope of colors in the shop windows, the sound of laughter from a nearby cafe, the smell of exhaust fumes mixed with damp earth, and the unique, beautiful geometry of a stranger's face. You are no longer rushing toward a future moment of satisfaction. You are fully inhabiting the only moment you will ever actually possess. You realize that the coffee at the end of the walk is not the prize, the walk itself, in all its vivid sensory richness, is the real destination. Think of how this applies to a difficult, stressful conversation with a family member or a colleague. In the egoic state, you enter the conversation armed to the teeth, your mental armor locked in place. You are not listening to understand. You are listening to defend your position, to prove that you are right, and to ensure your identity remains intact. Your jaw is tight, your heart is beating fast, and your mind is frantically calculating your next counterattack while the other person is still speaking. When you practice peace as the path, you drop the armor before the conversation even begins. You sit across from the other person with your shoulders completely relaxed, your breath deep and spacious. You listen not just to their words, but to the silence between their words, to the tone of their voice, and to the underlying vulnerability that drives their aggression. When they say something critical or hurtful, you feel the first arrow hit the brief flash of heat in your chest, but you choose not to fire the second arrow of retaliation. You look at their anger not as a personal assault on your worth, but as a vivid expression of their own internal pain, their own frantic search for control in an unpredictable world. You remain anchored like a massive oak tree, whose roots run deep into the earth, unaffected by the passing wind of their temporary mood. You speak from a place of clarity and truth, rather than from a place of bruised pride. The conversation ceases to be a battleground and becomes an arena of profound connection and mutual liberation. As we cultivate this way of being, a profound mutation occurs within our consciousness. We gradually move out of the cramped, suffocating room of our contracted ego and step into a new, luminous state of mind that can only be described as radical wholeness. This is a state of mind characterized not by a fragile, artificial calmness, but by an unshakable, panoramic clarity. Imagine standing on the very summit of a great mountain during a turbulent weather system. From this high vantage point, you can see everything with absolute transparency. You see the heavy black rain clouds rolling through the valley below. You see the lightning striking a distant pine tree. You see the patch of blue sky opening up over the western horizon, and you feel the freezing wind whipping fiercely against your skin. Because you are standing at the summit, you do not choose sides in the weather. You do not cheer for the blue sky and scream with rage at the rain cloud. You do not try to physically halt the wind or capture the lightning. You simply observe the entire atmospheric dance with a sense of profound awe, wonder, and complete non-attachment. You recognize that all of it, the darkness and the light, the storm and the calm, is an essential, magnificent part of the total movement of nature. When you achieve this panoramic clarity within your own life, you no longer divide your experience into neat, dualistic categories of good and bad, success and failure, peaceful and stressful. You realize that the difficult project at work, the physical pain in your lower back, the grief of an ending relationship, and the quiet joy of a sunset are all part of the extraordinary tapestry of being alive. You stop fighting against the natural, cyclical rhythms of your own existence. When sadness arrives, you allow it to wash over you completely, weeping openly without the second arrow of shame or self-pity. When joy arrives, you enjoy it fully, tasting its sweetness without the toxic undercurrent of fear that it will soon end. You are no longer a victim of circumstances. Tossed about like a dry leaf in the wind, you are the vast, unshakable ocean that remains perfectly still in its deepest depths, completely unbothered by the wild waves crashing upon its surface. In the final days of his long life, as he lay resting between two flowering trees, The Buddha looked out at the circle of his closest companions who were weeping bitterly at the prospect of his physical departure. He did not offer them a grand, complex theological dogma. He did not promise them an easy, miraculous salvation from the skies. Instead, he looked at them with eyes filled with profound, unconditioned love and delivered a final directive that has echoed through 26 centuries of human history. Be a lamp unto yourselves. Work out your own liberation with diligence. This final message is not a cold intellectual command. It is a stunning, revolutionary declaration of your own inherent power and completeness. It is a reminder that the sanctuary you have been searching for across the globe in bank accounts, in corporate boardrooms, in romantic partners, and in spiritual systems is already sitting quietly at the center of your own chest, waiting to be recognized. You do not need to acquire anything new to be at peace. You simply need to dismantle the elaborate, exhausting architecture of your unnecessary struggles. You do not need to become a different version of yourself. You simply need to stop running away from the reality of who you are right now. The path is not ahead of you. It is directly beneath your feet. There is no future moment where you will magically arrive at a permanent state of perfection. There is only this breath, this physical sensation, this room, and this heartbeat. As you prepare to step back into the rushing, demanding flow of your modern schedule, take this insight with you like a quiet, indestructible jewel. When you step out of your door and face the mountain of emails, the gridlocked traffic, the demanding clients, and the unpredictable complexities of human relationships, remember that you do not need to escape from these things to find stillness. The stillness is found in how you choose to meet them. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, release the knot in your stomach, step off the exhausting treadmill of the destination mindset, and allow yourself to arrive completely exactly where you are standing. The journey is over. You are already home. And so, we must leave ourselves with a final quiet question that will echo in the spaces between your thoughts for days to come. If you were to completely abandon the belief that there is something fundamentally wrong with this exact moment, and if you were to stop trying to fix or escape your own mind for just the next 60 seconds, who would you be? Discover the ancient Buddhist parable of the two arrows and unlock the secret to ending chronic anxiety, overthinking, and modern exhaustion. In this deep Zen teaching, we explore why our desperate pursuit of peace often becomes the very weapon that destroys it, trapping our minds in a permanent state of fight or flight. Learn the liberating practice of radical non-intervention to instantly drop physical tension, calm your nervous system, and step off the hedonic treadmill of achievement. Shift your consciousness from the suffocating room of the ego into a spacious, luminous state of panoramic clarity where you can house life's storms without being destroyed by them. Sit quietly, listen deeply, let the mud naturally settle to the bottom of your mind, and realize that you are already home.